You have watched these scenes dozens of times. The super soldier stepping out of that chamber, the spy trained from childhood to kill, the arms dealer captured in a war zone he helped create, the entire civilization hiding its true power from a world that would exploit it. You watched all of it and thought it was fiction, and some of it is, but not all of it, not even close. Because here is what most people never stop to think about. Marvel did not invent these stories from thin air. The writers, the directors, the comic creators, they looked at actual history, at real events, at documented programs and documented disasters, and they built their fictional universe right on top of it. The scaffolding underneath the MCU is the real world, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So today we are breaking down 8 Marvel scenes, 8 moments from the MCU that most people assume are pure imagination, and we are going to show you the real-world events they were built on. Some of these will make you look at your favorite characters completely differently. Others are going to be genuinely disturbing, because history, it turns out, is very good at being stranger than anything a screenwriter could invent. Let's get into it. The scene that launched the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe is Tony Stark riding in a military convoy through the Afghan desert in 2008. He is there to demonstrate his company's latest missile system for US Armed Forces. His convoy gets ambushed, he takes shrapnel to the chest from one of his own weapons, and he wakes up in a cave held prisoner by a terrorist group called the 10 Rings. What follows is the birth of Iron Man. Now here's the thing, that scene was not invented. It was a direct reflection of the actual war the United States was fighting when that film was produced. Iron Man was released on May 2nd, 2008. The US had been at war in Afghanistan since October 2001 following the September 11th attacks. Private defense contractors were embedded in that conflict in ways the general public rarely saw. The US Department of Defense did not just allow Marvel to film at Edwards Air Force Base. They provided actual F-22 Raptors, 2 HH-60 helicopters, around 150 service members as extras, and fabric for 100 uniforms according to the film's production records cited by Inkstick Media. That arrangement is not unusual. According to Inkstick Media's 2025 analysis, no fewer than 6 Marvel films were made with direct financial or logistical support from the US military, including Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Captain America, and Captain Marvel. The Pentagon reviewed scripts in advance and consulted on scenes before production wrapped. But Tony Stark himself was not conjured from nothing either. According to military historian Alex Rowland of Duke University, quoted by Space.com in 2008, Stark's character is partly based on real-life industrialist Howard Hughes, a man who financed experimental US military aircraft during World War II and the Cold War, built and piloted his own planes, and set a transcontinental airspeed record in 1937 in his Hughes H-1 Racer, and the Iron Man filmmakers quietly acknowledged that connection. Production of the film was based at the former Hughes Company soundstages in Playa Vista, California, the very facility where Howard Hughes built his famous H-4 Hercules aircraft. The first Iron Man film is, at its core, a story about what happens when an arms dealer is finally forced to confront the consequences of the weapons he sells. That is not a superhero fantasy. That is a question that has been debated in the halls of the US Congress, in international arms treaty negotiations, and in the careers of real defense executives for decades. Marvel just put a suit of armor on it. Captain America, the first Avenger, shows us a frail young man from Brooklyn named Steve Rogers, rejected from military service due to a long list of health conditions, who volunteers for a secret government program called Operation Rebirth in 1942. He is injected with a super soldier serum developed by a defected German scientist named Abraham Erskine. The serum enhances every aspect of his physical and mental capability. He emerges from the chamber transformed. And America has its weapon. That premise sounds completely fictional. Except that real governments have been trying, in varying degrees of desperation, to build exactly that kind of soldier for nearly a century. During World War II, both sides of the conflict were experimenting with chemical performance enhancement. According to documented historical research published in multiple medical and historical journals, methamphetamine was administered to soldiers on both sides of the conflict, including the German military, to enhance endurance, alertness, and pain tolerance. Researchers in Germany, Switzerland, and the Netherlands isolated and synthesized the performance-enhancing compound testosterone as early as 1935. There is documented evidence that German athletes at the 1936 Berlin Olympics were using testosterone under pressure from the Nazi regime to prove the superiority of the Aryan race. The United States did not stop asking these questions after the war ended. In 2002, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, launched a program officially called the Metabolically Dominant Soldier, later renamed Peak Soldier Performance, according to reporting by the Pioneer. That program investigated everything from drug compounds that could allow soldiers to burn fat instead of carbohydrates for fuel, to transcranial direct current stimulation for enhanced learning, to powered exoskeletons allowing soldiers to lift 90 kilograms as if it weighed 4.5. Sarcos Robotics, formerly a division of Raytheon, developed the Guardian XO full-body exoskeleton in collaboration with the US military. The United Kingdom's Defense and Security Accelerator has formally offered funding for what it calls Generation After Next Human Augmentation, including implantable devices, synthetic biology, and wearables for enhanced physical and psychological performance, according to Wikipedia's documented entry on super soldiers. In 2019, the U.S. Army Combat Capabilities Development Command released a report titled Cyborg Soldier 2050, which explored visual, muscular, auditory, and neural enhancements it described as technically feasible by 2050 or earlier, including brain-to-machine interfaces and brain-to-brain communication in military units. The fictional Abraham Erskine told Steve Rogers he was looking for a good man, not just a strong one, that the serum amplifies whatever is already inside. Real-world military researchers have never quite managed that level of philosophical nuance. But the goal? The goal is exactly the same. In the Black Widow standalone film, released in 2021, Natasha Romanoff's origin story is finally told in full. She was taken as a child and placed inside a program called the Red Room, a Soviet institution that kidnapped young girls, trained them from infancy in combat, espionage, and assassination, and deployed them as deep cover agents across the world. The girls were psychologically conditioned, subjected to subliminal programming, and in some cases given false memories of entirely different lives. Natasha was trained to believe she had been a dancer at the Bolshoi Ballet. Most viewers assumed this was a creative invention designed to make the character's backstory more dramatic. It was not entirely invented. According to Den of Geek's 2021 deep dive report and confirmed by multiple intelligence sources, the Soviet Union ran real spy schools for women during the Cold War. These programs trained women to use sexual manipulation, seduction, and psychological operations to extract information from foreign officials and compromise them for blackmail purposes. These schools were called swallow schools. According to Jason Matthews, a CIA officer with over 30 years of experience, including in Europe during the Cold War, and the author of the Red Sparrow trilogy, which the CIA officially reviewed as accurate and richly detailed, the Soviets used women specifically because, in his words as quoted by CNBC in 2018, they could try to sexually entrap high-ranking foreign officials for blackmail purposes to make them tell their secrets. Jonah Mendez, a former CIA chief of disguise and a member of the International Spy Museum's board of directors, confirmed the existence of the Kazan Swallow School in a 2018 interview with the New York Times. She described a specific incident during the 1980s when a swallow compromised a U.S. Marine stationed at the American Embassy in Moscow. The broader infiltration program was equally real. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, an American couple, were arrested in 1950 and later executed for passing nuclear weapon designs to the Soviet Union, the first Americans executed during peacetime for espionage. And in 2010, the FBI arrested 10 deep-cover Russian sleeper agents operating inside the United States, part of a network confirmed to have been living as ordinary Americans for years, matching almost exactly the cover story used by Natasha's fake family in the opening of Black Widow. The Red Room is fiction. The program that inspired it absolutely was not. When Black Panther arrived in theaters on February 16, 2018, it sold more tickets in its opening weekend than any movie in Marvel history at the time. The film depicted Wakanda, a fictional African nation that had never been colonized, that had quietly developed the most advanced civilization on Earth using a rare alien metal called vibranium, and that had hidden all of it behind a holographic projection of poverty and farmland to keep the world from coming to take it. The fictional premise was powerful precisely because it was built on a real historical wound. The writer Ta-Nehisi Coates, who wrote Black Panther comics beginning in 2016, has cited Ethiopia as a direct inspiration, specifically the Battle of Adwa in 1896, when Ethiopian forces defeated an invading Italian army and Ethiopia became the only African nation to successfully repel a European colonial power during the scramble for Africa. Director Ryan Coogler, in a September 2017 preview of Black Panther at Congressional Black Caucus Week, stated that Wakanda was imagined as an answer to a specific question: What would Africa look like if it had never been colonized? According to the film's production designer Hannah Beachler and costume designer Ruthie Carter, Wakanda was built as an amalgamation of real African nations, cultures, and aesthetics, drawing from Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, as documented by Inverse in a 2018 report ahead of the film's release. The Congo connection is particularly pointed. The real Democratic Republic of Congo sits on one of the richest deposits of rare earth metals on Earth, including coltan, a mineral essential to the production of mobile phones and electronics used worldwide. Throughout the 20th century and into the present, that wealth has been extracted under conditions that have killed millions and destabilized entire generations of Congolese people. Kugler has stated that the real-world exploitation of Congolese resources by outside powers was central to how he thought about vibranium. The fictional Wakanda hid its resources from the world to survive. The real Congo could not. That is not a superhero story. That is history. In episode 2 of the Disney Plus series Loki, released on June 16, 2021, Loki and TVA agent Mobius travel through a time door to the ancient Roman city of Pompeii in 79 AD, minutes before the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Loki climbs atop an ox cart, speaks in Latin to the terrified population, and announces their imminent deaths as volcanic ash begins to rain down behind him. The scene is played for a combination of dramatic weight and dark comedy, but the historical event underneath it is entirely documented. Mount Vesuvius erupted in the year 79 AD and buried the city of Pompeii under volcanic ash. This is one of the most thoroughly documented natural disasters in ancient history, preserved in eyewitness accounts including letters written by Pliny the Younger to the historian Tacitus describing the eruption in real time. Pompeii was subsequently buried under 4 to 6 meters of volcanic ash and pumice, according to documented archaeological records cited in Wikipedia's entry on Pompeii. The city remained sealed under that ash for over 1,700 years, preserving it with remarkable completeness until modern excavations began in 1748. What makes the Loki scene historically interesting is how carefully the production researched the actual timeline. According to Bam Smack Pow's 2021 analysis, the real eruption of Vesuvius on the afternoon of August 24, 79 AD did not immediately destroy the city in a single instant as depicted. The volcano first expelled a massive column of ash and smoke that blocked out the sun and rained debris over the city for approximately 18 hours. Some residents did escape during that window. It was those who stayed, whether unable to flee or unwilling to believe the danger, who perished in the subsequent pyroclastic flows. Tom Hiddleston, who plays Loki, earned a double first in classics at the University of Cambridge, and the scene was filmed with particular care, including Hiddleston speaking accurate Latin to the Pompeian crowd. The scene works because it places a fictional character inside a real, documented catastrophe that people can research and verify. And that combination, real disaster, fictional visitor, is a choice that anchors the entire Marvel timeline to actual history. In episode 5 of Ms. Marvel, the Disney Plus series released in 2022, the teenage protagonist Kamala Khan is transported back in time to August 1947 through a combination of her ancestral powers. She finds herself at a crowded train station during one of the most devastating events in modern South Asian history, the Partition of India. For many Western viewers, this was their first encounter with that event at all. Priya Sadia, a specialist in British Imperial history at Stanford University who served as a historical consultant on Ms. Marvel, confirmed in an interview with NBC News in October 2022 that the Partition of India was the largest mass migration in recorded history. When the British Empire granted independence to its South Asian colonies in August 1947, it simultaneously divided the subcontinent into two new nations, a Hindu-majority India and a Muslim-majority Pakistan. The borders were drawn by a British lawyer named Cyril Radcliffe, who had never previously visited South Asia and worked from outdated maps and census data, as documented by multiple historians, including those cited in NBC News' 2022 report. The consequences were catastrophic. Neighbors burned one another's homes. Trains carrying refugees in both directions arrived at their destinations carrying only bodies. Historians estimate the death toll from partition-related violence at between 200,000 and 2 million people, with approximately 10 to 20 million people displaced in a matter of weeks, according to documented estimates cited across multiple academic and journalistic sources. Aisha Jalal, a professor of history at Tufts University in Boston and one of the foremost scholars of the Partition, stated in NBC News' coverage that the generational trauma from this event continues to shape the lives of South Asian families today, decades later. Farooq Khan, an associate professor of post-colonial studies at Lahore University of Management Sciences in Pakistan, described it to NBC News as a wound that never really heals. Ms. Marvel was directed in its Pakistan set episodes by Sharmeen Obaid Shinoy, who in 2012 won Pakistan's first Academy Award for documentary filmmaking. The production team hired Stanford's Priya Saya as a historical consultant precisely to ensure the depiction of partition carried the weight of its actual history. The result, according to Saya, was the first time many Western viewers had ever encountered this event at all. A mass historical catastrophe affecting tens of millions of people that had been functionally invisible in English-language popular culture for 75 years. Marvel, of all franchises, put it on screen. In Captain America: Civil War, released on May 6, 2016, the Avengers fracture into two camps over a piece of legislation called the Sokovia Accords, a United Nations proposal that would require all superpowered individuals to register with international authorities and operate only under governmental oversight. Tony Stark supports it. Steve Rogers refuses it. The entire film is a battle between two philosophies about the relationship between power and accountability. That conflict did not come from a room full of Marvel writers staring at a blank wall. The original Civil War comic series was published by Marvel from 2006 to 2007, written by Mark Millar. In an interview with Newsarama following the publication of Civil War No. 7, Miller described the book as a story where a guy wrapped in the American flag is in chains as the people swap freedom for security. Miller conceded a certain amount of political allegory in the story, but said its real focus was on superheroes fighting one another, though he also admitted it was accidentally political because he just cannot help himself. The allegory was not particularly subtle. The Superhuman Registration Act in the comic books was a direct fictional parallel to the USA Patriot Act, passed by Congress in the weeks following the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, which significantly expanded the surveillance and intelligence-gathering powers of U.S. law enforcement agencies. The debate over whether that expansion of government authority was a necessary security measure or an unconstitutional violation of civil liberties dominated American political discourse for the better part of a decade. According to Mark D. White, professor and chair of the Department of Philosophy at the College of Staten Island, CUNY, writing in his 2016 book A Philosopher Reads Marvel Comics: Civil War, the narrative pits two fundamentally post-9/11 American principles against each other, the competing values of liberty and security. White noted to Pacific Standard magazine in May 2016 that the basic idea of freedom versus security is a perennial issue, but in the years around both the comic and the film, it was expressed particularly through debates about the NSA's mass surveillance programs, the Edward Snowden disclosures, and the legal battles over encrypted communications. The fictional Stanford disaster that triggers the Superhuman Registration Act, an explosion caused by a reckless superhero confrontation that kills over 600 civilians, mirrors in structure the public shock of a mass casualty event being used to justify sweeping new legislation. The mechanism was not fictional. The mechanism was the post-9/11 legislative cycle rendered in comic book form. Marvel did not invent the civil liberties debate. They put capes on it. This final entry is different from the others because it does not point to one specific scene. It points to an entire franchise. And if you have ever watched the X-Men films or read the comic books without realizing what they were actually about, this is the part that is going to reframe everything you thought you knew. The X-Men were created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Their first issue was published in September 1963. The team consisted of young mutants, people born with genetic differences that gave them extraordinary abilities, who were hunted, feared, legislated against, and systematically persecuted by a society that viewed their very existence as a threat. The X-Men fought for a world that hated and feared them. Stan Lee has stated in multiple interviews across the decades that the X-Men were a direct allegory for the civil rights movement that was reshaping America at the exact moment he created them. The first issue of X-Men was published 2 months after the March on Washington on August 28, 1963, when Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech. The Civil Rights Act of the United States was signed into law in July 1964, less than a year after the X-Men first appeared on stands. The two central figures of the X-Men, Professor Charles Xavier and Magneto, are documented by Lee himself, as well as by scholars and subsequent writers, to have been inspired by the contrasting philosophies of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Professor Xavier believed in peaceful coexistence, in working within the system, in the possibility of mutual understanding between the oppressed and those in power. Magneto, a Holocaust survivor who had watched his family murdered by the Nazis, had concluded that coexistence was a dangerous illusion and that the only protection was power. These are not science fiction positions. These are positions that were being debated in real American churches, real American courtrooms, and real American streets during the 1960s. The fictional Mutant Registration Act, which first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 141 in January 1981, was an allegory for the legislation and executive orders that had been used historically to target minority populations. The forced registration of Japanese Americans during World War II, the blacklisting mechanisms of McCarthyism, the surveillance programs directed at civil rights organizations by the FBI under COINTELPRO, which ran from 1956 to 1971 according to documented congressional records. The Sentinels, giant government-built robots designed to hunt and contain mutants, are not a science fiction concept. They are what persecution looks like when you remove it from the specific historical context that makes it politically uncomfortable and replace it with laser beams and mechanical bodies. The X-Men's most famous storyline, Days of Future Past, published in January 1981, depicted a near-future America where the Mutant Control Act had passed. Sentinels had taken over the country, and mutants were being held in internment camps. The story was not a warning about a fictional future. It was a warning about a real mechanism. The way democratic societies have historically transformed fear of a minority population into legislation, then enforcement, then institutionalized dehumanization, dressed up in the colors of science fiction so that readers would engage with the logic of it without the defenses that partisan politics usually trigger. This is why the X-Men have endured for over 60 years. Not because the powers are cool, though they are, but because the story underneath the powers is true. It has been true in every era. It is true right now. And Marvel has been making the argument in 4-color panels and on the biggest screens in the world for longer than most of their audience has been alive. So there it is. 8 Marvel scenes, 8 moments you watched as entertainment, 8 stories built on the bones of actual history, a real war that launched an Iron Man, a real Soviet spy school that built a Black Widow, a real independence crisis that displaced 20 million people and shaped a teenage superhero's entire origin, real government programs that tried to build Captain America, a real civilizational question about what Africa could have been that gave us Wakanda, a real volcanic disaster that Loki walked into, a real post-9/11 political fracture that split the Avengers, and a real civil rights movement that has been wearing an X on its chest since 1963. This is what Marvel has always been doing, underneath all of it. Not just making movies, making a mirror. The question is whether we are willing to look at what it is reflecting.